Hello folks, I'm UKA Rifleman, and in this instructional movie I would like to share my experience and fieldcraft regarding the control of grey squirrels with air rifles. I will also share the knowledge and experience of others, as there are quite a few methods used that I do not practice myself, but are extremely efficient and must be covered. I apologise in advance for the creaks and groans in the background. It's my amateur radio antenna array moving around in the awful weather we have. Today is Boxing Day, where I had promised a crow shooting session, but the weather has put paid to that idea, so I've taken the chance to record this instructional movie. And on that note, I wish all of my subscribers and viewers a very Merry Christmas. First, I will start with a quick profile of the species, as it's always important to know your quarry's habits to help you, the air rifle marksman, get the chance of a shot. The grey squirrel, the name used in Britain and Canada, or the eastern grey squirrel, the name used in its home range of the United States, and known to the scientific community as Squirrel carolinensis, is a member of the rodent family. It is an alien species in the United Kingdom, meaning that it was introduced to the country. It is thought this happened during the late 19th century, and so far I haven't been able to research any good reasons for its introduction, apart from a sort of twisted fashion statement by wealthy estate owners during a period where ecology and biosecurity wasn't really thought of. During this time, other exotic creatures such as big cats were kept, and thankfully these didn't take to their new home as readily. Otherwise, air rifle hunting with a sub 12 foot-pound weapon would be a seriously dangerous pastime. The grey squirrel's home range is the central and eastern regions of the United States and certain parts of Canada, but it has been introduced all over the world, including Australia, where biosecurity is now very tight. In 1973, Australia was declared grey squirrel free after an intensive and swift cull, which in my opinion is exactly what is required in the United Kingdom as well. The only hurdles we have, as grey squirrel controllers, is the access and permission to do so, mainly due to the ignorant opposition to the control of this animal, but I digress, and this isn't meant to be an animal welfare debate, so we will move on. The grey squirrel is a largely grey-furred creature, but it has shades of brown and a white underbelly. Its most distinguishing feature is its bushy tail. It can also be found, especially in towns and cities, in black and white forms, which I jokingly refer to as trophy squizzers. The animal, minus the tail, closely resembles a large brown rat, Rattus norvegicus, and is sometimes jokingly called a tree rat. That would therefore obviously describe its main habitat. Mainly found in woodland in the UK, the animal can be found extensively in the urban environment too, where it is a frequent visitor to garden bird feeders and also a main feature of urban parks. The animal mainly feeds on seeds and nuts, berries and tree leaf buds, nestling birds and eggs. It is safe to say that it is an extremely adaptive creature, but an article I recently read suggests that its spread around the country, whether wittingly or unwittingly, is mainly our own fault. The animal is a scatter hoarder, meaning it likes to make numerous small caches of food items to be gathered later during periods of food shortage or scarcity. It also has no natural predators in the UK, but it is known to be taken by some birds of prey and the pine marten. The animal breeds twice a year, producing litters in March and June, and builds large nests from twigs in the forks of trees called drays. In the urban environment, they are also able to make use of loft spaces to make nests, one of the long list of reasons it is considered a serious pest in the UK. I'll cover that bit next. The grey squirrel is listed on the General Licence for the Control of Pest Mammals, the same list that has the brown rat on it. The reason I mention the brown rat is because after you hear this list of reasons why the grey squirrel is a pest, the brown rat will look like a saint in comparison. I suggest you sit back with a strong drink and settle in for this one. In the 130 years since its introduction in the UK, the grey squirrel has displaced and seriously reduced the population of the native red squirrel, Squirrel vulgaris. The grey squirrel is larger overall and has basically outcompeted and bullied the red squirrel out of England, most of Wales and southern Scotland. The grey squirrel is, simply put, better adapted to the red squirrel's niche in our ecosystem overall, and to top it off, the grey squirrel also carries the squirrelpox disease that is deadly to red squirrels, yet leaves them completely unharmed. The disease's symptoms are similar to myxomatosis in rabbits and causes a lingering and painful death. Grey squirrels also caused £14 million worth of damage to forestry in the UK, it was recently estimated. Yes, that's 14 with 6 zeros after it. They have a terrible habit of ringing trees where the bark is stripped all the way around the trunk. The living part of the tree is just under the bark, resulting in its immediate death or exposing it to disease. They also cause damage to the biodiversity of the woodland habitat by raiding the nests of songbirds. They actually nibble fledglings alive and will readily predate upon the eggs too. This is probably the most horrifying thing these creatures do. Grey squirrels also cause damage to fields, gardens, parkland and golf courses where they dig holes to produce their numerous food stores known as caches. I was recently invited to a permission by a friend to shoot rabbits on a golf course near Selly Oak. The greenkeeper was convinced it was rabbits, but on further questioning he admitted he had never seen one. Despite this, me and my friend had several nights walking around all 9 holes of it, with the guns and lamps, sometimes till 2 in the morning, and saw nothing that resembled a rabbit, or any signs of them, apart from the holes the greenkeeper had described. Being fairly close to the city of Birmingham, it had a good head of urban foxes, which we managed to lamp and squeak in for a closer look. No shooting, of course, with just a BSA Scorpion and a Webley Raider 10 between us, but the foxes were not the culprits anyway. The holes were too small. Myself being the most experienced in Fieldcraft out of the 2 of us, I gained the greenkeeper's phone number and gave him a bell. I explained that there were simply no rabbits present, and then asked him about whether there were many squirrels there, as we had only visited after dark. Lo and behold, he exclaimed that there were hundreds of them. It was a weird phone call, where I solved his problem, yet lost the permission at the same time. I recall my friend being a little upset, but I let him come on to my permission out of sympathy. Plus the fact he had done nothing but plink golf balls at the driving range anyway. I suggested a daytime visit to have a crack at the squirrels in the out-of-bounds copses and woods that were part of the course. I explained that we were both insured with Basque, but the answer was a resounding no. In all fairness to the greenkeeper, I don't blame him, and a professional pest controller armed with traps would be a more discreet way to deal with them, which I dutifully suggested. Despite being lovingly fed and admired by ignorant townies, they soon regret doing it when they suddenly take residence in their loft and their household electrics malfunction, causing thousands of pounds of damage to roofing, guttering and electrical circuits, as well as the prospect of several expensive visits by a pest controller. They also damage garden trees and dig lawns up. To be fair, technically, I'm a townie, as you may be able to tell by my strong West Midlands accent, but I'm not ignorant and know the ways of the countryside. I'm also a biology graduate, specialising in freshwater ecology and ichthyology, but the principles are the same. For example, I'm fully aware of the problems caused by alien fish species, Japanese knotweed, the American mink, and the American signal crayfish. Being a victim of the loft problem, but not encouraged by ourselves by feeding or suffering any damage, I had to resort to trapping to sort out the problem. Having an air rifle loaded and ready to go just wasn't lawful, safe, practical or effective, but me and my dad did manage to chip away at them with the odd chance encounter, where we were able to get the rifle set up in time, and we had a safe shot on, but it wasn't effective enough, so traps it was. I'm pleased to report the loft is squirrel free, and we haven't seen a squirrel for weeks since. I'm sure whichever neighbour was supporting them misses them terribly, and that's the problem we have in the UK. Ignorant people just love them full stop. Squirrels also make a pest of themselves on shooting estates, where game birds are reared and fed. I see shooting estates as similar to a free-range chicken farm, but the birds are semi-wild and have a much happier existence overall, also having a sporting chance of survival and are not rounded up and electrocuted. If more people saw it like that, then pheasant shooting would be applauded and chicken farming would be on the way to being banned. But again, I digress. The squirrels take the feed left out for the game birds and damage feeders and other infrastructure such as pens, causing thousands of pounds of damage. They obviously damage the woodland that is deliberately planted and managed to shelter the game birds, and they take the fledgling game birds and predate the eggs. The list goes on, but I need to start talking about the methods used to target them at some point before you lose interest. As with all hunting, observation is key, and it always pays to do some recon work, even on a well-known and regularly visited permission. If your permission has a wood on it, then there's likely to be grey squirrels on it, but they don't just randomly turn up. A walk through it will reveal where they are and their feeding sites. Keep an eye out for drays too. Obviously take the gun with you just in case of a chance encounter. Grey squirrels seem to prefer deciduous woodland made up of mostly oak and beech trees with the odd spattering of ivy. They can be found in evergreen woodland, but they certainly are less numerous there. Don't bother targeting squirrels if it's raining, they normally stay in their dens. Woodland static hunting is a term I use to describe an ambush tactic, where you basically stand or sit in a wood, preferably with some sort of natural concealment, such as a thick tree trunk, hollow bush, or a basic hide, in an area where you have observed squirrels to be quite numerous, and in an area where you have fairly unobscured lines of sight to close by trees. It is a method you have seen me use in several episodes. It's a challenging method, especially with an air rifle. The animal rarely keeps still, and also rarely offer you an unobscured shot to the head. The ranges are also constantly changing, and the incline of your shots can be anything from shooting down a bank in the wood to a ground standing squirrel, or to near 90-degree inclines to a squirrel almost directly overhead. After several visits you will learn their routes from tree to tree, and it will become easier, especially if you know the rough ranges to each tree in your arc of fire. Despite this being the most sporting method of grey squirrel control, it is an inefficient way to do it. In unmanaged woods, where the trees are densely packed, with wild floors made up of low branches, brambles, nettles and deadfall, this tactic is effective in comparison to stalking, which is next to useless in a wood like that described. In this type of wood I find a .22 caliber rifle to be the most effective, as the ranges rarely exceed 25 yards. You should be in full camouflage, covering as much skin as possible. A ghillie suit is also recommended. Remaining still is important, but not so much as whilst hunting for other quarry such as birds. You are able to rotate slowly on the spot, keeping close to your cover, whilst keeping a close eye out for approaching squirrels. I find this method most effective on still autumn and winter days. This is because the branches are bare, making for a much clearer shot, and it makes the squirrels more visible. I say still because it makes it easier for you to spot moving branches not caused by the wind, and you can hear the sound of a moving squirrel, which are normally the first signs you will receive before actually spotting the animal itself. Don't just look up into the trees, scan clear spots on the ground as well, as squirrels sometimes feed and cache on the woodland floor. Stalking through a wood or across a field and approaching the animals unheard and unseen is an extremely challenging way to get within range of your quarry, but can be effective in most circumstances. I keep mentioning the word efficiency, and I would go so far as to say that this is the most inefficient way to hunt squirrels, but it's worth a go, especially in the following circumstances. If it's autumn, winter or early spring, when the leaf cover is absent, making it easier to spot the animals, and the woodland floor is clean and has been recently moistened by rainfall, or there is a defined clear path through the wood, it's a good time to try stalking. I jokingly say that you should be almost cross-eyed when on the move, both keeping an eye out for noisy ground like fallen twigs or leaf litter, and your quarry at the same time. You should move very slowly, taking deliberate footsteps, attempting to reduce the sound of your footfall, and taking great care where you place your feet. Also, balance is key. If you have ever watched a cat stalking, you will notice that it keeps its head and body almost perfectly rigid, with no up, down, or lateral movement, yet it gradually gets closer and closer to its prey. A pause every so often for a scan and a listen should be carried out. In areas where you are approaching a brow or about to make sight of new ground due to an obstruction, try to use the cover to peek into it unseen. Camouflage should be the same as the previous method too. If you spot an animal, then slowly unsling your rifle, if you use a sling, and get it ready by releasing the safety catch and getting other miscellaneous items sorted, such as scope caps, out of sight and as quietly as possible. Obviously attempt the approach and get into range if you aren't already. Observe its behaviour whilst doing so. If you think it spotted you, freeze. At this point the animal will either bolt or after a short time just regard you as part of the scenery and continue doing what it's doing unfazed. Then you can continue the stalk. Try to head for a target area within range where you can either shoot from concealed or use the cover such as a tree trunk or branch as a rest for the rifle. Failing this, try to get into the most steady stance you can. If you have time once at your target site, then take a moment to pause, and if you use a laser rangefinder, give it a laze. This will also allow your heart rate to reduce and accurately determine your aim point on your scope reticle. If the animal is still sat there with a clear shot at its head, then all the hard work is done. The marksmanship is all that's left to do. Baiting squirrels is the most efficient way to hunt this animal with an air rifle, but it can take weeks of preparation and can incur quite a lot of cost in both feed, fuel and time, especially if your permission is a long way from home. This method I do not carry out myself, mainly because of those reasons, and I am relaying the experience I have learned from others. These people are very efficient hunters and have YouTube channels of their own that if you are an air rifle marksman, you have likely heard of. For a practical demonstration, watch Matt Manning's Air Gun Show channel and purchase his books, or watch Phil Hardman's Hunting with Hardman channel. The best bait is a contentious issue and is down to the preference of the shooter and their financial means, but I'm inclined to follow Matt's advice here regarding peanuts. He actually carried out a test on 2 established feeders right next door to one another on the same tree. I can't recall the score exactly, but he significantly proved by a huge margin, something like 8-1, in the peanuts' favour over cereal baits. I have also heard some hunters use aniseed oil to attract them to the feeders more quickly, which is a method used by Phil. The feeder itself is normally constructed by the shooter, made from thick wood, and is a gravity-fed hopper with a hinged filling lid, a tray and a mounting flange. The feeders are sometimes fitted with steel plate to prevent gnawing and to act as a backstop for the pellets. They can be purchased, I believe, but it's not something I've looked into. You must gain permission off the landowner or gamekeeper before installing a feeder. Use nails or screws to fit it to your chosen tree. It should be fitted about 1.5 to 2 metres off the ground to prevent badgers and deer getting to it. Use screws as they can be removed afterwards, and the nails should be left slightly proud so that they can be pulled out. It's good practice to try and plug the holes left to prevent fungus or disease. Establishing a feeder is where the cost and hard work is. It may take weeks of observation and frequent visits to refill and gauge the rate at which the feed is being taken. Phil Hardman is particularly coy where he deliberately allows the squirrels to become accustomed to his presence as well. He does not shoot at them in the area and hangs around so that they associate him with food, almost taming them. It's extremely important that you do not let the feeder run out. Once the feed is getting hit hard and it's getting difficult to keep up with the rate it's going at, it's time to strike. Then you use similar methods to the static hunting method, except it's much easier in this case. Matt Manning uses a sparse hide and sits in front of a tree trunk to avoid being skylined and ensures a clear line of sight within range. He normally sets the hide up and leaves it in situ while preparing and establishing the feeder. He also uses shooting sticks for a steady shot. The squirrel normally grabs a nut and then perches on top of the feeder and then remains stock still whilst nibbling. This is when the shot should be taken. Patience will pay off here. Rush shots will ruin the whole thing if you miss. Once a kill has been made, mark it and leave it where it lies, unless wounded or stuck in the feed tray. The other incoming squirrels will generally not be spooked, their hunger overriding any fear. It's perfectly possible to get a shot every 10 minutes and really rack up the numbers. The feeder should continue to be maintained and shot over until the feed or squirrel kills dry up. Then move the feeder or re-establish an existing feeder in another location. I must talk about shot placement on this animal and the calibers used. The shot placement on the grey squirrel is exclusively the head and neck areas of the animal when using sub 12 foot-pound air rifles. Calibre, however, is a contentious issue. Some people insist on using 2.2, yet if the shot is placed as described, any calibre will carry out the task swiftly and humanely. I have, however, had greater success using the heavier 2.2 calibre BSA Ultramax, which I purchased specifically for woodland hunting, but I find the 177 calibre a superb all-rounder, especially using the heavier models of ammunition, such as the JSB Exact Heavy 10.3 grain. I feel that this issue is down to personal preference. Where air rifles are concerned, that about wraps it up. I have touched on trapping, and normally a full-powered air pistol is used for dispatching the animal, but that's where the relevance ends. I would look elsewhere for trapping methods, and besides, my experience and knowledge is extremely limited. There's also dray poking, but on the whole this is a method used by shotgunners. A pair of air rifle marksmen can stalk squirrels and work as a team, where the squirrel goes behind a tree to hide, the second gun rounds the tree to attempt to expose the squirrel to either marksman, and that's it in a nutshell, if you will forgive the pun. Therefore I hope this video has been informative, and I wish you happy and successful squirrel shooting. I'll catch you guys on the next hunt. Bye bye for now, folks.